afternoon, everybody. This is Andy with Two Perspective Studio. I am the prop chef, and today we're going to be making some fake pecan pie. I'm going to be doing a larger version than this. This is just about a 7-inch. I'm going to go ahead and do a 10-inch full-size pie of this. This is just the model that I was sort of experimenting with. I made some of these last year, so I'm pretty familiar with the technique. Changed it around just a little bit over the year or two. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. I have no idea. I can't remember. Hello, Marie and Tammy and Janet and Jamie. How is everybody today? If you're trying to find this on a replay and it disappears from Facebook, you can find and follow my YouTube channel. It's the same name. It's Two Perspective Studio with Andy. All of the replays that get deleted from Facebook are over there, plus some other content that never gets seen on Facebook. So if you want to see the extra stuff, you got to go over to YouTube. I also have, hello Wendy. I also have some other content that is appearing on my website, which is thepropchef.com. Hi, Vicki. And there's news in there. You can join the email list to get news on sales on things. You can get discounts on the Prop Chef materials, different things. So if you're interested in that, you can read blogs on there. I have a really interesting one going up this week. I had a client who was in the airline industry for over 30 years. He collected antique, there used to be an airline called Northwest Orient. I don't know if any of you remember that, but I do. But when I was little, I used to fly that with my dad. And Pan Am was another big one. So this guy has like a really long career in the airline industry. He has these antique, like first class, the real china. This is like English bone china that they used for the first class passengers on Northwest Orient back in the day. So he has a whole set of these. He saved a menu from one of the flights that he did. I guess it was like the standard menu for, you know, a period of time. He sent me all of these dishes and asked me to recreate what was on the menu and put it on all of his dishes, so that he has this little airline museum thing that he has all of his trinkets from over the years. And I recreated all this stuff for him, and it looks really good. I was super nervous doing it because I only had one shot at it. You know, when you put things down in the clay and the resin and all that, you know, you're like, oh my gosh, what if I screw this up? I ruined this guy's antique dishes. So I was super stressed out about it, but it came out really good, and he's allowing me to do a feature blog on my website of all of this. So I've taken a ton of pictures and some video and stuff, so I'm gonna write a feature of that and put it on there. So if anybody wants to check it out, all those pictures will be on there. I may put some of the pictures on Facebook too. So I'm making you hungry. Well, keep a straight face while you're watching me, because I may tell a joke or two. I don't know. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started with this pie now that I've been rambling on here. So the first time I made this, I went ahead and made, because I wasn't sure how to make decent, I've got a paper full of, I'm going to put my pie over here. I have a parchment paper full of pecans. I went ahead and rolled some out ahead of time because I knew I was going to need a ton, so I didn't want to sit here for the whole hour rolling. Hey Shelby, hey Deborah. I didn't want to sit here the whole time just molding my pecans. So I made this mold a while ago, and it's still pretty good. I mean, it's a flimsier mold. It was one of the first ones that I ever did, but I wasn't sure how to get a really good pecan, you know, a really realistic pecan. Hey Jerry, how are you, hon? Hey Jess. Hey Peggy. So what I did was I took 5 real pecans. One of them broke in the process, so I have 2 halves here, which isn't a bad thing because, you know, even when you buy whole pecans to put in a pie, you know, sometimes you'll have them break, but you'll still put them in the pie. So I thought that even added to the realism, having 2 pieces here. So that didn't really bother me. But when you make the mold, and being the dyslexic goofball that I am, I had to do a couple of tries. Hey AAA. Hey Janine, how are you feeling? I had to do it a couple of tries to get it just right. But when you put the pecans in your mold, for goodness sakes, put them face up, like the textured side of the pecan up, not down. I do these things all the time, and I sit there and I argue with myself about how it's supposed to be in the mold because my dyslexia messes with my head so much. But I finally got it, and you know, now I have this great little mold, and it's shallow enough, and I did that on purpose. It's shallow enough to where I can either use resin, I can use clay, I can use Model Magic, I can do whatever. Oh, thank you, Janet. So it's easy to use. Now, I will tell you, I use Model Magic. I know Jan was griping in our last segment there. Jan from Jan C's Designs was griping all about the Model Magic being too stiff and it was hard and all that stuff. Well, I use Model Magic almost exclusively. I feel like it makes the most realistic looking fake foods. Foam clay is great. These are actually made out of foam clay, and they hold their shape. It works, and I like it, and it's fine. For a lot of other stuff, I feel like foam clay puffs back up when I'm trying to give it texture and stuff, and it just doesn't have the same realism that Model Magic has. So I use that quite a bit. But for pecans and a lot of little doodads like jalapeno peppers or green pepper, mushrooms, blueberries, that kind of thing, I do use foam clay, and it works out just fine. But I don't always use a mold. But for these, as a time saver, I mean, you could make these without a mold if you had, and that's what I did the first time I made a pie. I had this needle tool, and I was taking the clay and trying to use the needle tool and sculpt each little pecan. That's like a total pain in the butt. I'm not even kidding. Worse than making 1,000 shrimp, right? Which I just got done with my 1,000 piece shrimp project. It will be delivered tomorrow to the movie studio. It is out of here, and I hope they love it, because if they don't, I'm not doing it again. That was 2 weeks of holy cow. Or holy shrimp, I guess I should say. But anyway, yeah, you don't want to have to sculpt all these pecans by hand. So making a little mold, you can even use the press mold to make these pecans, which I did a couple of years ago. I did a live on that. Just the 2-piece putty that you mold together and then push it down, and you would stick your pecan down into it and leave it until it hardens, and then you pull it out and you've got a perfect little mold. Either one works just fine. I know there's places on Amazon where you can buy these pecan molds. Jan probably makes a pecan mold. Cece may make one, I'm not sure. So they're easy to find if you need one, and pretty realistic. So if you're looking to make a pecan pie, definitely get some sort of way to make the pecan. The press mold is the easiest. Tammy, it's for a movie that's filming right now. Not going to say the name of it until I know that the shrimp scene is going to be actually in the movie. they're supposed to be making 200 shrimp cocktails with my 1,000 shrimp. So then that's for like a large banquet scene in this movie. But until I'm assured that it made the cut and it's actually going to be in the movie, then I'll tell everybody what movie to watch to see some fake shrimp that was made right here. So fingers crossed that it's going to make the final cut in the movie. So it'll be kind of fun, you know, to go see a movie and see my shrimp in it. I'm sort of excited, but anyway, back to the pecan pie. I'm going to scoop these guys up for just a minute. And I have, these are the pans that I use for my pies. They do not bend. They are foil, but they're a heavy duty pan. If you're selling stuff, especially if you're shipping it, make sure that you get some kind of heavy duty foil. Man, I've had some damage using subpar foil pans. It's actually harder than you think to find. I should have turned my glue gun on a while ago, but I didn't. I forgot. It's actually a little difficult to find the really heavy ones, but if you can find something that's, you know, even like the regular looking foil pan that's even just a little heavier, it'll save yourself some aggravation in the long run. If you're selling in person at craft shows, you probably don't have to worry as much, and you can get away with a little bit, you know, less expensive pan for sure. If you're just making one for yourself, like, I mean, I make them for people in the ceramic pans quite a bit. Sometimes I'll take a more decorative pie pan, you know, like this one. I have some that are colored that are really pretty that I'll do them, you know, for special occasions, and you know, that's neat. It's not a difficult project. Just about anybody can do this. JR always says any trained monkey can do this. I'm like, thanks, honey. Does that mean I'm a trained monkey? I don't know. You never know with my husband what he's going to say. So, the first thing that, he's probably going to get very mad at me for repeating that on here. The first thing that I'm going to do is take some of the, I don't know if I can even reach it. You can get this at Dollar Tree. It's like a foam board. It's got like, you know, it's, I don't know exactly what they call it. They may call it foam board, but you can, you know, buy it for cheap at Dollar Tree. You can probably get it a lot of other places. I'm sure Walmart has it. But I make it, and it doesn't have to be like the exact circle because I don't have an exact circle here. I broke my protractor thingy that makes the good circles, and now I don't make good circles anymore. Yes, he always has a way with words. My truck driver husband has a definite way with the English language. I have to wait for my glue gun to heat up a little bit so that I can hot glue gun this in here. Now you can put a foam disc in here if you're concerned about it falling. If you have a pan with a little bit of movement, you may want to put foam core board. Is that what it's called? I thought it was something like that. It's kind of like what you put in the back of a picture frame to take up the space. It's sort of like the same thing, only this seems to have like a paper covering over it, the kind at Dollar Tree. I mean, anything will work, really. Anything that's good and sturdy. You could use cardboard from an old box to do the same thing. I mean, it's not a big deal. But I put it down in the pan probably about a ½ an inch. You don't have to put it down quite that far, but I find if you're using anything kind of chunky like these nuts, you want to make sure that you have enough room for your crust to sort of sink down on the side, and I'll show you that in just a minute, plus your filling. And then if you're especially if you're using resin and you're going to pour some resin in this, you don't want your resin to spill over the side. Like if you're piling some clay apples in here to make an apple pie, and then you put your crust, your lattice crust over the top, you don't want to pour your resin and not have enough space in here and all your resin starts going over the side. I actually just had it happen this morning, which is why I'm telling you that. Don't do what I do. Make sure that you leave some space. Hey, Jan. So I'm hoping that my glue gun is sort of hot enough, but I'm just sort of going to try and hold this in place and move it along here, and I'm just going to glue it in. And it takes a little bit of glue, especially if you leave space. And I try not to leave too much space because then you usually have to go over your glue a second time. You want to seal your whole area off to make sure that if you're using resin in your pies, like I do in a lot of my pies, I'm actually going to use a resin alternative today for the pecan pie because I think it looks more realistic than resin. Get in there. When it comes to this type of pie, this pecan pie is more of a chunky, it's not really chunky, but it's, pecan pie filling is weird. It's not as smooth maybe as like cherry pie filling, blueberry pie filling, apple pie filling. They're smooth and translucent. Pecan pie filling is more opaque and globby, I guess just because of the sugars and the syrups that combine in there. So what I'm going to use instead of resin for this pie, I feel makes it look a little more realistic. And it's something that's easy to find, it's easy to work with, and you don't have to worry about it quite as much as resin. Alright, so that was good. So I sealed the whole thing all the way around. I made sure that there's not any cracks, no openings. Hey Raymond, how are you today? So the paint that I'm going to be using is a burnt sienna. This is the Master's Touch that you can find at Hobby Lobby. And thank you, Wendy, for this suggestion. I've had this clay behind my back just warming up a little bit. I never thought of sitting on it, but I'm not going to pull anything out from under my butt like Jan did. So no offense, Jan. I'm just going to put a little more than I was hoping. I'm just going to put a little bit of this paint on my surface, and I'm going to just quickly shade this the same color as my pecans. And the only reason that I'm doing that is that I want to make sure that none of this white is going to show through and make it look funny. And I'm not paying a whole lot of attention to how I do it or any of that. I'm just sort of slapping it on. And that's it. I just want to have something around the same color. Good morning, or good morning, good afternoon, Cece. So the next thing I'm going to do is the outer crust. Now this is Model Magic, but it's tinted, and I'll show you why I do that. I'm going to open this one up. I like Model Magic for pie crust more than anything else, because I feel like it looks more like real pie crust. And I don't need a lot more. Get this back in the bag so it doesn't open up on me. So I'm just going to condition this a little bit. And you want to make sure that you condition it enough to where it stretches without ripping, breaking, or snapping. And that's technical terms. And if your clay is really cold or really hard, sometimes I'll take it out if it's a sunny day. I mean, I live in South Carolina, so it's sort of the surface of the sun around here. But you can put your clay bags out in the sun for about 15 minutes to warm up. It really helps. Also, if you have a really harder one to knead, I'll use the surface. Like I have a tile on here. This stuff doesn't stick to a whole lot, but I will roll so it's taking some of the pressure off your hands and your arms trying to stretch it and all that kind of stuff. But use whatever surface that you work on and roll it out into these big worms and then stretch it. And then just bunch it all up again and roll it again. And it's not so hard on your hands and your wrists and all that kind of stuff, getting it all nicely conditioned. And it doesn't take as long. So I think this is probably, yeah, that's got a good stretch to it. No breaking, no snapping, none of that. So that didn't take very long at all. You can, I mean, I probably should do it more, but I usually, hey Renee, I usually do this ahead of time, and I did not. I did a bunch of other stuff ahead of time, but not this. So once I get it conditioned, if I'm doing something that requires tinting, or I'm making a cookie that's like this color that I want to shade, this is like a really nice cookie dough color. So I'm using a yellow ochre. It's O-C-H-R-E, if you're not familiar with I guess they're professional paint colors. But it's sort of a brownish yellow. It's called yellow ochre. It probably comes in a craft paint as well. Actually, I'm pretty sure it does. I think I've seen it. But I'll just put some paint right in my Model Magic, and I can tint the clay. Now, you don't even have to wear gloves with this if you don't want to. It's just paint. It's not going to hurt anything, and it actually will pull right back off your skin once it gets kneaded into the clay, and it'll pull back off my gloves too. But I'm doing it just so that I don't make too big of a mess on camera, which I usually do. Boy, yesterday all I did was make messes. I didn't stop making messes. And I didn't get a whole lot done either. The things that I accomplished were not nice looking, so. So I just kneaded that in, and I'll give it a roll. Oops. And basically that's what I do before I start my pie crusts. I just make this tinted clay solution. Now I'm only doing the outer rim for this. Most of my pies have a lattice crust over the top of it. My apple, my cherry, and my blueberry all have lattice tops. The pecan is an open face, so all I need is the outer crust on this one. And it's not going to take, let me move this out of the way for a minute. It's not going to take all of this clay. This is way too much. But I'm just going to roll it out anyway. Now my tile is 24 inches. And I know it takes about 25 inches to go all the way around my my 10-inch pan here. I'm going to cut some of this off because I know I have too much and it's too thick. I want to get it down to where I have about a 1-inch worm that's about 25 inches long. So I just use this part of my hand to roll it until it gets all the way up there. And then I'm going to take some glue. Now my preference is Gorilla Glue. Craft glue works just fine. I use Gorilla Glue just because I ship all over and I've had a lot of damage and I don't like damage, so I try and really nail stuff down. Glue it down, glue it down. So all I do is put my worm on the rim of the pie pan. Stick it down on the glue. And then I go back and make sure that it's shaped nicely. And I press it down just a little bit, just flatten it. And I'm not concerned about this seam over here at all right now. I'll take care of that in a few minutes. Oh, I can't put that in there, can I? All right, we'll just leave you there. So I don't want to, well, maybe I do. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, so you see how some of the foil is still showing underneath that rope. When you start manipulating your crust into a pattern, the pattern that I use, let me get these out of the way. The pattern that I use is I take two fingers side by side, and I'm starting right at my seam. You see, here's my seam right here. I'm going to take two fingers and I'm going to press down about just like a ½ an inch in between my fingers. And then I'm going to take my other finger and I'm going to start at the inside and I'm just going to press down to where it makes a bump. And then I'll put my thumb in this indentation on the end and another ½ inch, and I'll press down and push and make another one. Put my thumb in and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And then that's all I do around the whole outside of this pie. So it's quick and easy. And then I come back to the end. Now the seam is no longer visible there. It's completely gone. Now I'll take my hand and just sort of round it up, make sure that it's not wonky. And then for the inside, you notice that the foil is not visible anymore. You can see some of the, I can make a blueberry pie. I'm going to be making lots of fall pies and cookies and cakes and all kinds of things. This is the first of the fall pies. Now, Model Magic, another reason why I like to use it for the crusts is everybody knows foam clay has a decent amount of shrink to it. Some clays more than others. I find the really soft ones, the really soft foam clays have more shrinkage than the firmer foam clays. That might just be my imagination, I'm not sure. But I know that it has a significant shrink. When you're trying to do pie crusts on you know, with the shrink factor. Sometimes it'll pull up from the pie pan, or it'll shrink up from the middle, and you don't want that. You want it to hold its natural, you know, when you put it down, that's how you want it to end up. Model Magic has a very limited shrink when it, you know, when it's drying. This will dry up in about 30 hours. With our climate here, if you're in a drier climate, probably less. But you know, I don't have any trouble with thin pieces like a pie crust. You know, overnight usually is all it takes for it to dry up completely. Enough for me to finish and seal it. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take some, because I'm not going to use resin for this pie, I'm going to use a silicone glue. And this one looks like this because I found it in, I buy this by the case, and I opened up the case and there was one bottle broken and a bunch of other ones stuck. So this was the one that leaked out, and I'm going to go ahead and use the rest of it. This is just like, it's a silicone glue adhesive sealer. It sort of mimics resin in a lot of ways, but it's thicker right out of the bottle, and it dries in no time. Like in less than an hour, your silicone glue will be dry, in most cases. My daughter was putting together a haunted house that was made out of cut pieces of wood, and she had some like clear acrylic sheets, the bendable kind, and she wanted to put it on, like, on the backs of the windows and tint it like a yellowish orange to try to make it look spookier. And we mixed up, just like what I'm doing now, some silicone glue with a little bit of, I think we used a golden color alcohol ink, and we tinted it, and she just took a popsicle stick and smeared it on the acrylic sheeting, and because it's a glue, she just pressed it up against the back of her little haunted house on the windows and made these tinted windows, because she's going to put some little tea lights in it. And it's like, it was really cute. I'm not huge on Halloween stuff, but the little house she was making was cute, and I loved the little tinted windows. So there's a lot of uses for this silicone glue. I use it a lot, not just because I'm allergic to resin, but I really like it. It's a really good product. And it's, you know, it's easy to stir. It's sort of like honey, you know, when you're, and the color just reminded me. It's like a honey consistency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump this batch right in here to give me a layer to stick to for my pecans. And I'm hoping I can get this all spread. Maybe that wasn't quite enough. Let's see what I can do here. I mean, these pecans are not all the way dry. I just rolled them before I came live. Let's get this one out of the way. So while this is still wet, I'm going to start placing my pecans in here. And it's going to take a lot of pecans to fill this, so I doubt I have enough, even with what I rolled. Have I tried resin spray? I have actually never even heard of that. There's a resin spray? What is it used for, AAA? Is it just like a resin sealant? Yes, the silicone glue is on Amazon. I think they have a pretty good deal on a 2-bottle pack. I buy it from the manufacturer in bulk because I use a lot of it. I like it for a lot of things. I did for the airline man's antique dishes, one of them was a salad. I had never made a fake salad before. I've made pieces of salads, but not like a whole salad, a whole dressed salad with cucumbers and tomatoes and all that. So I kept thinking, oh gosh, I have to make salad dressing. You know, is the resin going to look good? So I tried the silicone glue and added some little fleck of my fake parsley and fake, well, it's like fake, kind of like fake, what do you call it? Red pepper, like chili, not chili powder, but like red pepper flake. That's what I'm trying to say. And I mixed it in the silicone glue with just a little bit of tint, sort of a very pale yellow tint, and I made a really good looking Italian salad dressing, and I was so excited. And once I get this first layer on here, and you can do this before you layer them or after. Either way works. The pecans need to be sort of shaded and tinted. I did have enough for the first layer. That looks pretty good. So I use this same paint, this burnt sienna, and I'm gonna shade the top of my pecans to make them look a little more realistic. Sometimes I use a little brown as well. It just depends on how they look after I do this. I did use, and I didn't tell you that before, this is a gingerbread clay. This one happens to be from the Primitive Pumpkin. This is the gingerbread from her. You can find her on Etsy. It's a nice clay. Annie's Treasures also makes a nice gingerbread that I like. I think I got Primitive Pumpkin this time because Annie's Treasures was out of some stuff. So I have, I don't know if you can see my paint. I have some water over here, and I sort of water down my paint. Not a ton. I don't want it wet going over the clay. Just a little bit. But this will add a little bit of shine. Oops, I got that on the crust. That's all right. We're going to go back and shade the crust in just a few minutes. But my silicone glue is already setting up underneath, so I don't have to worry about that. That's why I said you can do this to the pecans before or after. If you're using resin underneath your pecans to sort of help glue them down initially, by all means paint your pecan or shade your pecans ahead of time. Don't do it with wet resin under this, or you'll make a mess. Ask me how I know that. If there is a mess to be made, Andy has definitely made it. And I will probably, now that I'm looking at this, I'm probably going to add a little bit of brown on top of this, just because I think it's too much of the same color. So I'll add a little bit of brown. Alright, there's the first layer. So I'm going to grab some, let's see. This is a burnt umber. It's sort of like the chocolate color that we use. I like that one. And I'm just going to do just a little bit here and there just to add another color. Because the more colors that you add into your fake food creations, the more realistic they're going to be. Layering is the key. Starting with, typically you start with lighter colors and you'll build up to the darkest color on the very top. And that way you have a more realistic outcome. And I'm just using little bits of paint, not anything heavy, not globbing it on there, just a little bit here and there. But they look much more like real pecans when you give them a little bit, you know, these different colors. Does anybody not like pecan pie? Oh no, Wendy, I use resin a ton, and I have the rashes to prove it. I am very allergic to resin, so I have to be pretty careful. We make a lot of cocktails and drinks and cold coffees and stuff that we sell in our Etsy shop. Mojitos and scotch and all sorts of different things, and they all take resin. The airline man's glasses, I did a red wine and a scotch on the rocks in his little airline cups, but they're all resin. See, that looks very realistic with the different colors. You know, you have the color of the clay, then the color of the paint, and then the little shading over top. It makes it just that much more realistic. So I will add some more, because I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there are tiny spaces where you can kind of see through to the bottom. That was why I put the paint on that white board, because I didn't want to run the risk of seeing that white through there, because you're not going to look at a pecan pie and see anything white. If you do, you probably don't want to eat it. A salted caramel pecan pie sounds pretty amazing. Anything with caramel in it. Yum. Of course, these days it would have to be sugar-free for me, but anyway. So I have a few more of these pecans made, so I'll have to make a few more, I think, to just fill in these spots. Then what I'm going to do is make another batch of my goo, my pecan pie filling, and I'll go over the top and just drizzle. So it'll look like the goo, but it won't lay on the top and just be a solid mass of funk. You know, it seeps down, I guess is what I need to be saying. Oh, sorry about that. I start talking for a long time and then I have to cough. Hi, Margarita. Hi, Laura. Okay, so I'm going to take another, and I don't need a ton more. I just want to sort of fill in. And then I'm going to shade the crust, and then I'll put the topper on. So I'm going to grab my mold, remove the pie. So I have 4 whole pecans in my mold, and it does not take a lot of clay to fill these little molds for sure. Hi, Tina. Just, you know, tiny little pieces, really. Because you don't want to overflow them to where they look like they have big bottoms sticking out of it. Kind of like me. So you just sort of press it flat in your mold. I do spray these. My mold has a lot of Pam spray in it. That's what I use. I just use the Pam spray. And they pop right out. If they start sticking, just spray them again. Sometimes I spray a little Pam spray on my fingers and I just rub them down inside the mold cavities. I do that with my popcorn molds too, which I make out of Model Magic. Model Magic popcorn I feel like is the most realistic. I know some people make their popcorn with real popcorn and then they just resin over the top of it. I've tried that a couple of times, but I feel like there's too much breakage even with the resin on there. I always feel like there's especially when you're shipping it, I feel like there's too much leeway for breaking, and I really don't like that. So I make each popcorn piece out of the Model Magic, and it really doesn't, it only takes about an hour to do a full-size popcorn. So I don't think it's too bad. That's usually something that I do if I'm watching TV at night. You know, I'll do popcorn or I'll hand roll nuts or blueberries or things like that. All my other nuts I do by hand, except for walnuts I'll do it with a mold. Pecans and walnuts are the ones that I mold. Everything else I just do by hand, just because it's quicker. And once you kind of get a rhythm going of, you know, how you need to manipulate things, it's usually pretty easy. I think I'm going to put these on first, and then I'll go ahead and paint over the top. Like I said, I'm just sort of filling in a little here and there where I can see through it, because I don't want to see through it. Even though I have painted that underside, I still don't want to see through it. I'm going to go ahead and put these guys on. Let me make a few more. You see the difference in the colorations between the ones that are colored and the ones that aren't. So I'll probably do maybe like, no, I only have 10 minutes. Marie, can I have another 5 minutes today? If you're still on here. Marie and Nicole are up after me on Marie's page, Great Creations Faux Cupcakes. And they are supposed to start at 3. Or Jan, if you're on here, maybe you could ask her if I could have another minute just to finish this. Don't need too many more, because I don't want to do 2 full layers. I'm just trying to get it to where it looks natural. Thank you guys. I won't be long. Like I said, if you are looking for replays of anything that I have done in the past, look to my YouTube channel, because Facebook is deleting our videos after a couple of weeks. I think it's like 30 days. So if you're looking for anything that I've done in the past, or you want to check out my YouTube channel that has other content that's not shown on Facebook, it's under the same name. It's Two Perspective Studio with Andy. Or you can find other content on my website, thepropchef.com. You can subscribe to our email and you'll get coupons, and you'll get blog posts with information on doing different techniques. So if you're interested in that, think, I'm not crazy about that one. All right, I think that's what we're going to do there. Okay, so then we just need to shade these guys and shade the crust and put the topping on. And that should be the end of that. Get a little more of this brown to go over the top. I keep wetting my brush just to make sure, that, and I don't want to, you know, I'm not saturating the brush, that's not what I mean. But I do have enough to thin this paint down just a little bit, because you don't want it on here very thick. You want it pretty thin. I'm going to get that off of there, that's better. And once these are shaded, I think they will blend in nicely with the ones underneath. I don't think I'll have to put any more on, but I'll take a look when we get this all done. All right. I'm just going to quickly shade over the top with the brown. What is this thing doing? There's somebody trying to spam me on here and my computer is not liking it. Sorry about the noise. Put more on my crust. Yeah, be careful flipping your paintbrush around too quick. You get it on your crust. They're really trying hard. There, all blended in. So I think that looks really nice with the shading. Looks pretty realistic. Now all we have to do is shade our crust and put the rest of our filling topping over. This is where I wear gloves. So for shading the crust, I go back to that yellow ochre that I used. The alcohol ink that is a combination, actually. This is by Ranger, and it's caramel. There's several different companies that make caramel, and the ones that I've tried are all about the same. This is by Sigwong. This is a golden. It's more like a gingery kind of color, which Ranger also makes the gingery color almost the same as this, but I'm out of it. That's why I'm using this one instead. So any combination that you have that kind of looks, you know, realistic. I think the caramel and just this little, it's sort of a golden yellow color. It's like that gooey, because it's brown sugar and like Caro syrup, like corn syrup, that you blend together to make the filling, you know, with other stuff of course, but to make that filling for the pie. So anything that's got that sort of brown sugary hue to it, I think is fine. I wouldn't get hung up on color combinations too much on this, because you're only going to see, it's only going to lend a little bit more shading, in other words. You know, you can see it in the cup, but you're not going to see it as much when you go and, you know, put it on the pecans like this. It's not going to show. It sort of blends in. It just lends a little bit of a golden brownish goo, kind of like what pecan pie has. So I think that the caramel would be fine by itself, just don't overdo it. But I think if you can drop just a little bit of yellow in with your caramel, it gives it something. And I meant to do the crust before I poured this in here, but I will do that just in a second. I'm going to leave this to sort of sink to the bottom while I'm painting this crust. Alright, I put the paint up. Let me get another paper towel to wipe off my brush. We're going to finish this. Alright, I cleaned off my brush. I think I have some silicone glue stuck to my brush. Alright. So my brush is clean and it's damp. Now I'm picking up a little bit, just a little bit with the damp brush of that ochre color on both sides of my brush. This is a soft, flat brush. It's about an inch, it's a 3/4 inch flat. All I'm going to do is very lightly with this ochre, because I already have shading on my crust. I already put the paint in the clay. So then all I'm going to do is go over with this next color and define it. Now I'm sticking mostly to, you know, the bumped up portions of this crust. Little crust mountains. And I don't want to put a ton of paint on here. If you get too much paint on it, take a baby wipe and wipe it gently, and it'll come mostly off while it's still wet. So if you make a mistake, you can fix it. But just going over it, and then I'll sort of just lift it to make sure that I'm getting all these undersides here. Any little overhang, you know, you don't want it to be too prominent. So that's basically all you have to do to shade your crust. Now once that dries a little, I'll take a little bit without the water, without so much water on the brush, I should say, just a damp brush. And I'll just sort of pounce my brush into this color, and then I'll go over it again on these little, just the tops, like where your crust is going to get the most done. You know, you have to think about these things as if you were baking this in a real oven. What would it look like when it came out? And obviously the higher portions of your crust or your cookie or whatever you're baking are going to get the most darkness. They're going to get the most baked. So you have to compensate for that look when you're doing the fake versions of it. You know, which parts are going to be darker, which parts are going to be lighter. Now I'm not cramming the brush down in all these little gullies because I want them to stay lighter. Kind of like that. So I have darker, and my camera's not picking it up wildly perfect, but I have darker on the top and lighter on the bottom, and just like a regular pie crust would be. Yes, that's a yellow ochre. So then I'm going to go back to, for the final step, I'm going to go back to my silicone glue, and I'm going to get this whole bottle just about, pour it out of here. I think these are about just shy of 4 ounces in a container, and I think they're think they're around like $1.80 maybe a piece. I know they're not, I mean, they're expensive, but they're not terribly expensive. I'm just going to put a little of that caramel color in there, and then just a couple of drops of this golden on top. So maybe like 5 drops of the caramel and 3 or 4 of the golden, and it makes this sort of rich honey look almost, you know. And it might be a little more honeyish looking than regular pecan pie, which is usually, you know, a little more dull in color, I guess. But it, when you put it on here, you're not gonna see that as much. Now you can use an old paintbrush to brush this on evenly, or you can just sort of swizzle swirl it like I'm doing, and then use your popsicle stick over the top. Either way will work. Just make sure that you pay attention to get all up near the crust part. Make sure that they're all covered because you want that glossy look. And you can sort of gently just manipulate it over the top of these pecans. It will sink down in between them, so you're not going to have any clumpy lumpies up over the top of them. I mean, it does sink, but you don't want to get too much on, but just pay attention to where you go right along your crust line. Just so that it looks like your pie is full. Even though it's not going to be, nobody's going to know that at the end here. So you just need to make sure that most of your pecans are mostly covered, because that's the way that it would come out in a pie. You'll have some that'll stick up just a little bit when you make a pie, but most of them will be covered in the goo. Because when you make these, you roll your pecans around in the stuff, and then you put it in there. So now you have a nice shiny looking, and it does give that resin look, but it's not resin. And this will be dry in no time. No time at all. Within the hour, this will be touchable. So that's about all there is to it. Start to finish, you can do this in really no time at all. So this is a pretty easy one to do. I am 5 minutes over my time, and I know Marie and Nicole are probably excited to get started. If I can find my mouse. I think I buried my poor mouse somewhere. But thanks everybody for joining me today. I hope you got something out of the pumpkin pie tutorial and that you'll try and make one yourself. You can hop on over to Great Creations Faux Cupcakes and catch Marie and Nicole coming up next. I'm not sure what they're making, but I'm sure it's going to be amazing. I will do some pictures of this and have it up there later. Like I said, if you need to catch the replay, you can find it over on YouTube at Two Perspective Studio with Andy. So until tomorrow, which will be my live sale at 10 a.m., I'm signing off, and I will see you guys later. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a great day. Bye.